I think the biggest thing is relationships. It is for the entire industry, but in particular, the GC CM layer to the trade partners and vendors is probably the most critical relationship to have, because, like you said, Trey, it's what's driving the bulk of the cost on the project, and is what's actually building the project. We're in this business to build buildings, to build communities, to build operations and all that stuff. And without the trades, you can't do that. You can conceptualize things and design things all you want, but someone laying a brick or putting up a wall is needs to be in the field and with their hands on to do that. And all the credit to them to be able to do that. And certainly there's times where I'm thinking, that would be nice to do so sometimes, just to get out of the office and get a little dirty, right? So it's an important part of the our entire industry.
Well, welcome back to Proper Precon. I'm Troy Simon, along with my partner in Precon, the man who carries around a fully loaded GMP with alternates and just enough fee to keep the lights on in his pocket at all times. He's the breaker of bad assumptions, folks, the eliminator of figured out later, the master of scope and schedule, the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only. Of course, you know him as the professor, Mr. Trey Darnell. Trey, how you doing today? I had to give you a big intro. I've been waiting to do that for 3 weeks now.
That's a lot. Those are someone else's big shoes to fill. But yeah, doing great. It's Friday, and it's spring. The weather's amazing right now. So no complaints over here. How are you doing?
Excellent. Yeah, the weather's been great. Got in a round of golf this week. So that was fun in one evening, although I didn't shoot that great. But the good news is we played scramble rules, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But it was my first time out in like 12 months. So it was long overdue.
Yep, that's awesome. Yeah, we're going to be at AP next week. We actually get to play some golf. There's the Ryder Cup thing with a bunch of folks there, so it's going to be fun.
I heard you guys were playing golf. I'm a little bummed that I didn't get the invite, but that's okay. I'll let it slide. I know it's part work, part fun, so that's okay too. But so we've got a special guest today. We've spent the first 3 episodes of this show so far really talking more on the builder side, talking through how general contractors estimate projects, how they build cost narratives, if you will, or maybe how the cost narrative should be told. How they can earn trust with clients, et cetera. But today we brought in someone who doesn't maybe necessarily fit neatly into any of those buckets so far. So why don't you introduce us, Trey, to our guest?
Yeah, so we've got Justin Valentim. He is with Mill Creek Residential. He is a salt of the earth guy, and just cares deeply for his work, for the people around him, and is constantly trying to help and serve others. Both through work and his personal life. So we've been working with him now for a couple years, and talking through a lot of challenges in the industry. And so, yeah, just glad to have him on. This is a great follow up to last week to kind of talk through the developer and builder side. But I don't want to steal all his thunder. I want to let him kind of speak to himself. But Justin, thanks for joining us, man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity, and looking forward to the chat.
So tell us about Mill Creek. I mean, you guys are one of the largest multifamily developers in the country, right? And so I'm sure you've seen a bunch of different angles that in your pre-construction department that we haven't talked about. I mean, before we get into substance today, maybe just set the stage a little bit for the people that might be listening. You're not a traditional owner waiting for a GC to show up, and you're not a GC waiting for an owner to show up with a project. You guys sort of create your own destiny, if you will. Walk us through where you guys sit in the market. Tell us a bit, about Mill Creek, your role there. Take us through just some day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm director of pre-construction for the Boston office for Mill Creek Residential. I sit in Boston most of the time, although working from home today. I've been with them just about 5 years now as director of pre-con. Before that, I was almost 10 years at a Massachusetts general contractor, Callahan Construction Managers. Great group of folks, family-owned business. They do a lot of multifamily work, but work in other markets as well. And Learned a lot there, had a lot of opportunities, but when push came to shove and I saw an opportunity to grow and to move into something a little bit different and something maybe with a little bit more control. And I know we'll be talking about how being in the owner world is a little different from the GC world in more detail, but really it's the ability to affect change early and often in the process that really drew me here. And great group of folks to work with as well. So, but yeah, Mill Creek is national, primarily multifamily developer. We're actually a vertical company. We're developer, builder, operator. We also have an acquisitions team and an investment management team that kind of round out our 5 core verticals for the company. And then we have a number of support teams, whether it's accounting, IT. We also have some in-house resources like a internal architectural team, internal design managers on the interior design side, number of different folks that touch the projects along the way. So we work with some of the national folks to help develop our projects, and then we work locally with our teams, development, construction, and operations to help bring our projects to market. But yeah, we as Trey said, we do mostly ground up multifamily. That would be our Modera brand for those that are familiar. We also have acquisitions side of multifamily. That would be our Alistair brand. We've got a few of those in our market and a number across the country. And then we also have, over the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, gotten into the single family build to rent market. And that's our Amavi brand. We don't do that up here for obvious reasons, land prices being what they are and some of the challenges with developing in New England. Not that we wouldn't if the opportunity arose, but yeah, most of it's down south, Midwest so far. I forget how many communities we've developed or started, but there's definitely a handful, and starting to learn more about that market. Brought some folks in from some of the other developers that do that stuff to help us out. So it's been a great experience for me here. Across the country, we've got close to 30 active markets, over 20 offices. Right now, we're operating 150 communities, whether they're in operation or construction, and that's totaling almost 45,000 homes.
Wow.
And we're looking to continue to grow that and be one of the leaders in the multifamily space.
You doing any work down in Atlanta?
Yep, we've got an Atlanta office, Florida, up and down the East Coast, all the way Midwest. We primarily stick within the Smile States, the markets there, but we've got office in Denver. We just opened one up not too long ago in Salt Lake City. So in all the major markets that a lot of our competitors are in as well.
Well,
What's interesting is you said to be one of the leaders. What I love about that statement is you guys are a leader in the market. But you said it so nonchalant, which that's what I appreciate about you is like this idea of just the character and the people component. Like if we're not, there's always room for us to improve. And I love everything that you just said, man. Like that is gold. That's awesome.
my question was going to be, what's the scale and complexity of your operation? And he covered that
Yeah.
effortlessly right there. So
Yeah.
Yeah, he said different markets that, this we're not in this market, but this is a market. Like that was great.
So, I mean, most of the conversation, Trey, we've been having has been around it's framed around GC owner dynamic. The GC builds a number, the owner lives with it. And it sounds like, Justin, we haven't got into it yet, but do you guys kind of collapse that dynamic because it's your own work? And, what changes, if anything, when the people that are, which is you guys writing the estimates, if you will, are the people they kind of like the deal lives or dies on whether you guys, feel the number is right or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So our workflow or our collaborative process starts a lot of the same ways that typical development does. Our development team is on the ground, talking with brokers, talking with architects and engineers, talking with any folks that are willing to bring a deal in front of them and have us consider them. Always open to those opportunities. And they'll start to look at some of the comps and the any of the information that may come with the seller in terms of opportunities and what that looks like, the sell book and all that stuff. And then fairly soon thereafter, if it's something that the team wants to consider, they'll reach out to myself and my supervisor, who's the VP of construction for the Boston office. He oversees what I do, but I'm kind of a solo guy when it comes to the work that I do in the office, at least most of the time. But collaborating with everyone along the way. So they'll come to me and my supervisor Bill and say, "Hey, we're thinking about looking at this project." They'll tell us, "Hey, it's a long shot, or maybe this is one we really want to go after." We'll talk about what the needs are, what the interest is, and then figure out from there like how much effort we're going to put into putting together roughly cost model or just a conceptual estimate, usually off of some narrative and maybe a sketch of the plan. Sometimes it's a little bit more depending on where the project is in the seller's world. Some of them are in for early comprehensive permit and ready to be moved along into design. But most of the time they're just napkin sketches. Hey, we want to make some money by selling this land to someone, and here's what we've conceptualized to pull someone in like us. So it's getting in as early as that for myself and for the rest of the team, of like using our historical knowledge, both locally and for me, my past work with Callahan as well. And kind of knowing what things cost in this market, and then figuring out does that work, does it not, are there things that we can play around with, or is it close enough essentially to move it forward into our investment committee, and then beyond that into actual design.
So like you'll talk to architects and engineers, like your brokers go talk to like designs that are potentially happening now, right? But everything else can be done in-house around like performer works. You guys have a builder arm as well. Do you also
Yep.
work with other GCs in some cases if the design's too far along and there's already GCs involved earlier on, right? Do you also work with other GCs that aren't your own, your own branch?
Yeah, it's not typical. We haven't done it here in our market, and some of the other markets. I think Denver was one of the newer ones when I started. They were utilizing third party. It's when we have a case, usually like high rise, where we don't have as many people in a certain region anyway that are familiar with it.
Okay.
That for Boston, that may be the case here if we ever did one.
Yeah.
But primarily we're quote unquote self-performing our work, or we're the CM. So we've got project executive for each office, at least one, project manager, senior project manager on it, APMs, sometimes project engineers, and then supers and assistant supers to help run the projects. So we run a little bit leaner than say the something like a Callahan, where they have a lot of different bodies to focus on it. We run much leaner. I don't remember what the total construction staff number is across the country, but we've got, I think, somewhere between 1,100 and 1,200 total associates in Mill Creek across the country. So that tells you, less than half of that is construction related staff. So, but yeah, so we're helping guide that all along the path, and utilizing everyone's expertise where we can. But if it comes down to it and we need to bring someone else in, then it's not necessarily the end of the world to do so. And we collaborate, even if it's not they're building it, we'll collaborate with some folks in the market just to say, hey, what are you guys seeing on this? Or it's
Yeah.
always good to share information. So
It's
Yeah.
industry forward, right? I think that's great. You
yeah,
have a business model, but, it's a creative business model in that where you need additional resources, you can plug those in. That's awesome.
yep.
I think the
Um,
cost of land, has that really been a challenge over the past few years? I mean, I live in the I guess North Atlanta area, so the land costs up here have just been going through the roof over the last 5 years. So they're still developing, though. I joke. I mean, they're not going to be happy until every square inch of dirt has something on it.
Yeah.
But uh, has that been a challenge for you guys? Just finding good deals in the market?
Yes and no. I think total development cost has been the bigger challenge. Obviously, a lot of disruption over, gosh, the last 6, 7, 8 years in construction with materials and labor and delays and availability of certain materials. So that's been a big driver. There certainly had been a point where land, at least for us up here, it's generally more expensive. There's less of it to develop,
Mm-hmm.
and more challenges to doing so. But when I first started, we definitely saw things kind of near the peak. And then, along the way, as we try to keep the project moving along, obviously negotiations happen to get things done. And, we eventually fell, I think, in most parts, in comfortable spaces. We do see still in the market today, some folks, overbidding. If we have competitors that are looking at the same piece of dirt, they'll sometimes overbid if they want to be in that market or if they need to fulfill a backlog. So we don't necessarily chase numbers like that, but we're smart about where we go and what we go after. So it's not always an issue, but it can squeeze things definitely down the line as we get through design and a lot of the code implications, the community implications. That's where it goes from being okay to being this might be a challenge we need to solve for down the road. So, which is typical.
yeah, cool. Well, Troy, I think we should probably we're kinda into some additional topics here, but probably before we do that, we wanna go ahead and dig into the pre-con punchline, and because Justin already he's got one in the hopper ready to go. So, we're
I
gonna
was
let him
worried we
do
were
it.
going to skip that accidentally, so I'm glad you
No, we're
brought that
not.
up.
Yeah, yeah. So, Justin, give us
no,
the pre-con punchline.
yeah. So it's from a Dilbert comic, but essentially it's a developer owner coming to ask him for an estimate for a project, and he's like, "Hey, can you get it done quickly?" And Dilbert turns around and just says $8 million. And he's like, "Well, that's too much." And Dilbert goes, "Well, how do you know?" He's like, "Well, you don't even know what the project's about." And Dilbert just says, "Neither do you."
Yeah,
It's my favorite. It it it
They
talks a
love it.
lot to at least my past experiences of
yeah,
having to communicate what cost drivers are and stuff. And
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of sob stories to tell about that. It's certainly much different here, given how close I work with all the teams. But definitely one of my favorites. It's something every time I sit down at my desk, I take a look at and just breathe a sigh of relief that I'm not dealing with it as much these days.
I love that you said comic strip and Dilbert. You're taking me back. It shows your age a little bit, but I really you're like, it's nostalgia. It's good.
Yep.
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, we do have a lot to talk about. I don't know if you want to start, Trey and Justin. Like, I was thinking, walk us through maybe like a typical pre-con process on one of your, typical deals there from the moment you guys are under contract. What's the timeline look like? I know you talked a little bit about who's involved already, but maybe some major milestones you guys are working towards, things like that. Because one of the things we've talked a lot about on the show is the cost of starting over at every design milestone and sort of scrapping that estimate and rebuilding it from scratch and instead of iterating. So I was wondering, like, when you guys own both sides of the table, if you will, you guys solve that problem, or does it still happen? Just maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started, and still to some degree, there's still some of that mindset of, go through the typical workflow of maybe we're in conceptual, and then we're in with SDs, DDs, and GMP, going through the typical process, letting the design team kind of run wild with the design, making the development team happy with what it looks like, and then not happy when I tell them that it costs too much. And there was a lot of that when I first started, and then I tried to break that a little bit. I think as a company, we're trying to move away from that model a little bit. There are certain things that we still have in place that I think we need to think differently about or change. We have a thing called the bright white line, which occurs essentially after SDs, where it goes, the saying goes, we're driving a car. Initially, the development team is driving that car up through SDs, and then we pass things off to construction, and then they're driving the car. And somewhere I'm sitting in the backseat in the middle trying to tell them where to go. um, but we've made a lot of strides, both intentionally and just by necessity, to move towards essentially, towards a target value design mindset without necessarily implementing it. And the most recent project that we just started, Modera Alston here, it's in Boston proper, so a lot of challenges with that one, a tightened timeline, a lot of different red tape to get through. So I kind of stepped up and said, guys, we already have a schedule issue as it is. And we also have a laundry list of different things that we need to do, from permitting and approvals and reporting and all that stuff. We need to lay this out. We need to figure out how to get through this together with the design consultants, with all of our team, and everyone else that's involved with the process, to move this forward. And so I think that went well. And I've heard and seen other offices do that. On the construction side, just kind of tie things together. There had been, over the last few years, a big push on lean planning, doing pull planning, all that kind of stuff. And so I think a lot of that's starting to permeate into the pre-construction side of things, and try to take that concept. So to that point, the next project that we're working on, my supervisor, Bill, came in just 2 or 3 weeks ago and said, hey, Justin, and development team, we're thinking about going the TVD route for this one. And I was like, yes, let's go. But there's some things we're going to work through. And actually, we have a meeting Monday to start talking about what that looks like, pull the development team in to get a better understanding of what that is. We're essentially doing it already, but giving them a better idea. But on top of that, I just sat in yesterday to a poll planning session for design out of our Austin office down in Texas. And it was awesome to see and hear, and see where they were going with things. And yet again, TVD was brought up as something to look into and to consider. So we have a lot of that structure in place where we're able to, like I said earlier, we're working on the conceptual estimates, the cost models for the development team to start setting that pro forma, and then work with them, with the design consultants, to kind of inform design a little bit. But now it's about focusing that and being more intentional about that process that we need to take that next step for.
The process and the price, right? So here's the thing. I give high fives in meetings. Dude, podcasts are no different. I'm giving you a high five, brother. Target value
Nice.
design for a project, like, that's the thing. Come
Yep.
on, let's get some. That's amazing. And the fact that you're like, I love the analogy, or like the imagery of you being in the back seat. You're like, it almost feels like backseat driving a little bit. But but the irony is, backseat driving, if you think about it, is not generally, backseat driving is it's more irritating, but the value you bring from the back seat is crucial Like the things you just said is crucial for success for the project, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a difference of opinion. It's a difference in does the project move forward or not. That's how valuable your opinion is, that's just so cool to see.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, and I would never admit it, backseat driving, but my wife has saved me from several wrecks with that. So there's great value in it.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it's true. Yeah. So I'm
Okay,
sure you're a
so
great driver.
yeah, I am a good driver. Last week, Justin, Trey, and I, we spent like a full episode on this idea of the cost narrative that, the estimate isn't necessarily the deliverable, the story behind it is. We're framing it though, like as the GC's problem. So like, how do you help an owner understand what they're looking at? But again, you guys, probably have removed that problem on one end of the building, or maybe it's just shifted up a floor. Not sure, but because I assume you've got, I think you may have said this, but I assume you got investors at times on some of your projects or capital partners, maybe board people, things like that. They may or may not understand construction. They speak finance very well. So now it's your job to sort of be that translator. When do you ever have to take your budget to like an investor or capital partner, and what do they ask for? I mean, are they asking for certain metrics on it, cost per unit, some type of impact, or what's the language on that side that you guys are having to speak?
Yep. Yeah, no, great points and question. So yeah, you're right. We are more open book with our development team, and have an understanding of what they need to see. I certainly could show them all the detail if they needed to. They're not going to love that. They're going to get bogged down by what is this line item for. And we do go through some of that because those might be the cost drivers or the issues that we can't escape. But we've worked on understanding what those metrics are that they're looking for and what drives the pro forma. So it's what the average net rentable per unit is, what's the parking ratio, or are we making sure that we're meeting the minimum that we need, if not what we prefer on the projects, all those kind of things. And I've developed over time, both at Callahan and here, different ways of looking at cost, also looking at different efficiencies or metrics on the project from a quantity perspective that I know drives things like average amenity size per unit is one that you don't necessarily always capture, but can be a driver. The same thing for parking. Parking adds a ton of cost, but is necessary. And so how can we minimize that impact as much as possible? So locally we have a lot of understanding around that and a lot of great conversations about where that's driving towards, as early as conceptual, but oftentimes as we're heading into STs and beyond, and reminding them, hey, this is why we're at the point where we're at, because we had to do this, or we decided to do this. Doesn't mean we can't go back, but that's part of the process. But then moving up the chain with our investors on projects, we try to use a lot of the same folks, region to region. That's not always the case. We get new folks in from time to time, but that helps because we've developed on our development side, they've developed those conversations and those reporting items with those folks fairly regularly. So we're easily able to take our narrative on the pre-con side to our development team and maybe decode a couple things, and then they're able to encode that for our investment side of things fairly easily. There'll be questions that come back that we need to handle down the road or whatever. When there's new folks coming in, we kind of need to relearn that, but our teams are great about explaining that story and understanding from the construction and pre-con side the parts of the story that are important for them to tell as well. Whereas in the past, as a third party GC at Callahan, I almost got none of that, and it was always about telling the story. And I wore multiple hats. I was a takeoff guy, I was a bid coordinator, I was a
Yeah.
an estimator. I was a storyteller. I was a analytics guy. It was everything. It's not that I'm not doing that here. It's more streamlined, and I don't have to necessarily worry about every nit and nat about the process. I can focus on the things that I know are going to drive the conversation or drive the pro forma at the end of the day.
It seems like it's more streamlined, like easier on your side because you have a lot of that stuff in house. And again, looking at the purpose of this podcast at the end, like for us, is like you're in a space where you kind of all of that's encompassed, right? When I was doing this in the building world, we have to understand those pro forma metrics too. Like when I was in construction, I left and I came back to construction the first time. All those things around, I didn't know my cost per eggs. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but it was a lot. It was a lot less sophisticated than what it turned into when I went back into construction, right? And then you have owners saying or developers saying like, "Well, now I want to see cost per X," and I'm like, "Dude, where did that metric come from?" Right? It's like I'm not saying you're making this stuff up as you go, but you are creating new metrics, as you said, like average cost per amenity. Like this cost per amenity in this is actually it can be valuable insight, right? Um, so from that standpoint, like so you mentioned pro forma. Something else we also hear is IRR, initial rate of return. Those two things on their own, I want to expand on those a little bit, and specifically around like, so it seems like the pro forma is like the story. That's your story on paper, right? But the IRR, that is an outcome of that story on paper, right? But it's not the input. But you have to understand it to see, does this thing actually pencil out, and actually from an investment standpoint, does it actually, can we make this work, right? So I want to index on those things now. I want to get your thoughts on that because I think that's one thing where builders from the builder side can drastically improve in how they communicate with developers, because ultimately IRR is a time metric, right? It's timing. Like, what's the market look like? We talk all the time at Edify about like speed and pre-con. If we can speed up the cycle, we spend 2 years in pre-con. You're talking about those design milestones. Dude, if we could do that in 6 months, what's that do for your IRR? What's it do for your pro forma, right?
Yeah.
Let's tease some of that out in this conversation to see how we can actually empower builders to do some of those things better.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, for us, 2 years sounds great. We had two projects that we started last year that were in-house before I was here, 6-7 years in-house. Obviously, a number of different reasons why that occurred. Some of it market driven, a lot of it municipality and neighborhood driven. And it's something we always have to deal with. Other projects are more like 2 or 3 years, but always looking for ways to improve the process, certainly.
Yeah, no, and let me clarify. I'm not suggesting like there's permitting, there's all kinds of things that, let's just call it like bureaucracy for what it is. I get that has to happen. That time frame is not your own. Totally get it. However, how you engage with your builder as a developer, you can control those things.
Yep, absolutely. And that's where some of the target value design stuff is coming into play. Like, let's really have a better understanding of what the end goal is. And we've had that visibility to some degree, and trying to, get more open about it in those conversations. But yeah, we talk a lot about the unit mix, the different efficiencies on there. We'll have conversations about, do we add dens, do we add bathrooms, do we take out or add balconies. We talk about all those type of things, design decisions that certainly have an impact on the hard cost of the project estimate and the ultimately the project budget. But we start to play around with those things early on to say what's going to drive it. And in my time here, like I said, I've been here almost 5 years. I've learned more and more. I had basically an inkling when I came here, and have learned a ton about what drives it, and what's going to be best for the project, so that now I can talk from that backseat position of protecting both sides of, like, construction's going to need to do what they do and mitigate their risk, and development's going to want the greatest return on their ends, as much as possible, because our investor is asking for that as well. So knowing what levers to pull, as with everything on the estimating side, is a little bit of art, a little bit of science. But it's starting to become, with more time here and changing our process a little bit, becoming more science based, which is, I think, helpful. It helps speed those things up a little bit more than and it also doesn't rely on the same folks who may be moving around, or may not always be there to help guide the art side of things,
Yeah.
and have that as institutional knowledge that we can pull from in the next project, or even down the road. So always working to improve those things, but we're in a pretty good position to be able to have an understanding on all sides of the table of where we need to drive towards. And then it's just about talking, like, do you think this works? Does this not? Here's where we think it's going to be. So it's all about communication and openness, and knowing what the ultimate goal is. And that's being able to develop a project so that, we all get paid at the end of the day. Right. So,
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you can underscore enough what you mentioned, starting with the end goal in place, or the end goal in mind first, because costs are always going to move, when you have a live project going, especially if it's, multiple year project, and those conversations with those capital partners have to be a little bit easier. Because you guys are owning the full process, from construction to development. But I guess having those conversations up front and really understanding what their end goal is probably makes it easier as things start to iterate over the process, I would imagine.
Yeah, and Justin, you also said you keep saying target value design or TVD, right? Like, um, I think target value design is really the desire for every project. Let's just call a spade here. And you mentioned like understanding across the board. I've said things like we want to make shared understanding. If the desire is target value design, regardless of contract type, I know there's hard bid, there's negotiated, there's GMPs, ICP, like all these different, right? All these different project types. The fact that your business is moving, like we want to try TVD on this, like that should be the desire of every company in my mind, right? Like we're all trying to work towards a number. Go back to your comic, $8 million. What are you talking? What are you talking about? Look, we don't know, right? But it's like, well, that's the number. Well, that's not the target value. Well, that's because we don't have the context behind it, right? You're just asking for a pretty quick number. And so I think one thing that I love about this conversation is you're pointing towards shared understanding. You're pointing towards the desired state of the industry of like, if I go to a hard bid job and I'm trying to create shared understanding and start like pitting GCs against each other to give me the lowest number, am I really creating shared understanding, or am I just making friction? Right?
Yeah, no, it's I think what I've seen is that just in the move here, just because of the way things are set up, as a vertically integrated company, a lot of those initial barriers on the front end dropped, and continue to stay down. I think for us, those next steps are further dropping the barriers on the design consultant side, and then certainly on the trade partner side. That's kind of the last frontier, I think, of bringing folks in to help collaborate. But I think on the front end for a third party GC trying to get a better understanding, I think it's about communication and setting the expectations up front with their client, their developer, and try to get an understanding even beyond that with their investment partners. Like, what's your actual timeline here? What are the things that could change that? And what are your goals and expectations? What drives this for you? It can be different from developer to developer. I worked at Callahan with one developer out of Massachusetts that we did a number of projects with. And so by the second, third, and fourth projects, I had a really good understanding of what they were going to expect. We had another one that I will say maybe precipitated a little bit of my decision to leave. That was just a nightmare. They kept changing what they wanted. They asked for different metrics all the time, different ways to break things down. By the end of that, I started to understand what they were looking for, but we had given up so much and still were in the wash of like, is this real for you? Is this not? When is the actual timeline going to happen? That it was just frustrating. So trying to break down that initial barrier of like, what's your actual timeline? What are the things that are going to hurt you being able to pull this forward. Be honest with us. Like if we're, a check number, okay, that's fine. We'll go in with the understanding that we'll try to be aggressive, but that, we don't necessarily need to be bottom dollar because you've got
Yeah.
someone else in mind. Like that stuff
Yeah.
happens. It's part of doing business, but I think companies can do better about standing their ground. Obviously, they need to have a business model that allows them to do so.
Yeah.
But they need to be able to say, listen, I want to be a great partner for you here,
Right.
and in order to do so, you need to reciprocate.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of it.
Yeah, partnership is not sitting across the table from each other and trying to work towards this thing in the middle. It's sitting by each other and trying to work towards something together, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
And everyone's not the right partner, and that's okay. And sometimes you wish you had this easy button right here that I could just boop. Yeah, here's all the stuff, and just take my number. Let's move on. But this is again human nature, right? It's okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Before we get on to the next segment, we need to take a quick sponsorship timeout here. This episode of Proper Precon is brought to you by Edify. Edify is the estimating platform built for contractors that are doing high value construction. Pre-construction is where every project starts, where every project success is determined. But many times it's still managed with disconnected spreadsheets, outdated tools. And so we build Edify because pre-construction is not any one person's spreadsheet, but it's a team effort that deserves real collaboration. Teams will spend months, sometimes years, pricing and repricing disconnected tool or disparate system only to misalignment with the design team or an owner goal, something of that nature. And Edify solves that by creating one connected environment so all the project stakeholders are working toward those same targets faster. So if you can listen to this and you're building a pre-con practice that needs to tell a cost narrative, Edify is worth a look. Go to edify.com. That's ediphi.com and see it for yourself. All right, we're back to the conversation.
Well, Justin already started leading us there. He mentioned trade partners, and we see pre-con as kind of the last frontier too, in some regard. But it sounds like trade partners are the last frontier when you look at target value design. And what's interesting about trade partners is that they often cash flow the job. They also make higher fees in some regard because, frankly, I think they should, because they put the work in place. But let's talk a little bit on the trade partner front. And how you kind of
Yeah.
engage with those folks. And again, with the builder in house, you probably have good relationships with folks around the country, and maybe you go to new markets and you're like, well, we don't know this market. How do we actually get plugged in here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is relationships. It is for the entire industry, but in particular, the GC, CM layer to the trade partners and vendors is probably the most critical relationship to have. Because like you said, Trey, it's what's driving, the bulk of the cost on the project and is what's, actually building the project. We're in this business to build buildings, to build communities, to build operations and all that stuff. And without the trades, you can't do that. You can conceptualize things and design things all you want, but someone laying a brick or putting up a wall is needs to be in the field and with their hands on to do that. And all the credit to them to be able to do that. And that certainly there's times where I'm thinking that would be nice to do so sometimes, just to get out of the office and get a little dirty, right? So it's an important part of the our entire industry. But yeah, from our perspective or our workflow, at least when I started, it was a lot of the same things. Going out for bid coordination, sending out invites to bid with some directions with the project documents, and then setting a period of time to get feedback on that, and then leveling those things out and figuring out what we want to carry into the estimate.
How do you do that? How much weight do you? I'm sorry to interrupt there, but how much weight do you give their numbers versus your own historical data or just things that maybe know about the market?
Yeah, I think up until now it's been again more that art of I came here with almost 10 years of knowledge from a general contractor that did a lot of this work. So it was about getting the right outputs from the trade partners, or at least a way to get to those outputs, that I could then use to, calculate the metrics that I thought were important for me to say, yeah, this seems right, or no, this doesn't seem right. And obviously, when you get multiple bids, you get the opportunity to say, okay, we know we can trust these guys because we've worked with them before, or, we've heard good things about these folks and, we'd like to use them, but they just continually be, a couple percentage points high when we go to do buyout. So, if they're in a relative range of each other, you have pretty good confidence. And then it comes down to those metrics like, okay, everyone is coming in around this number, but maybe there's something within that number that doesn't jive. Maybe it's a section for light fixtures that seems high compared, historically. And when you look at the total project estimate, you say, hey, we're over budget by X and we need to figure out where the savings are. So having those conversations and relying on, at least in the past, relying a lot on our trade partners to help guide us on alternative products or alternative methods. We've gotten smarter about that and driven more that conversation up front. We have a national purchasing manager now who has brought in a number of different partnerships on the vendor side that allow us to be more directive to the trade partners. And then here locally, I've tried to develop more conversations and information within our bid forms and our bid leveling process to give a little bit more direction to those folks, to our trade partners, to get what we need out of them, and no more or no less, for the most part, so that they're not doing another day or week's worth of work that they didn't need to do, right? And trying to,
You
because
took the
at
words
the
right
end
out.
of the day,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
you're protecting their time and not pulling them
right.
in on
They're-
either too early on deals or something that's not real, or just having them work, too much for the sake of working. So
Yeah, they're not
that
getting
was
paid for
literally my
pre-con,
next
so
question for you. So that, you
yeah,
answered it straight away. But
yep, yeah, and it's like I said, they're not getting paid to do pre-con. They may put some cost in their estimate and their proposal to capture some of that cost back, but if you've got 3, 4, 5, sometimes 7 bidders on one scope, only one of them is going to get it, and 6 just lost out on their time and effort, right? So I've always tried to be open and communicate with our trade partners about timing as much as we could. And certainly better here because I have more visibility now to do so. So that's the first step. The second step is, hey guys, you look like you're 10% high, and I really can't figure out why. Can you tell me a little bit more about your thought process? What you think you may be a little bit conservative on, or where others might be aggressive. And we're going up to a lot of the same people time and again, so they're going to know who their competitors are. So they're going to say, hey, that guy typically is missing this, that, and the other thing. So maybe you go check with him on that. But it's trying to be more open with them and provide some feedback. But we still, as of right now, we're still, keeping the trade partners and the vendors a little bit more at arm's length, where if we want to go towards the full target value design route and delivery route even, we need to pull those folks in early, give them an incentive to work with us, and break down the barriers of the old school thinking of we need 3 bids per trade, right? That in some cases we can't get that in our market anyway, because there aren't that many people that can do the size project that we want to do or in the time frame that we need to do it. And so start breaking that out a little bit, and being a little bit more mindful of who we bring in when and how they can affect not only the cost but the design and the timeline too. So it's developing all the time, but we're still kind of stuck in that typical mindset that most GCs find themselves in as well.
Well, and it a lot of GCs will bring in the larger trades earlier just because they carry so much of the cost of the project. There's so much risk there around like concrete or MEPs or drywall, right? Like things that get them get the builder towards like the milestones getting dried in, right? They'll bring in the big stuff, but not always the small stuff. But you're right, like it you can only pick one, right? But you're gonna have to, even if you get pricing from 3 other folks, like, I always thought it was interesting. I don't want to operate what you just said was perfect. Like, you're 10% high. Help me understand, right? That's great. But I would want to operate in the stance of there's plenty to go around. Let me explain how the world works. Um, we're gonna keep getting more people in this world because new people are born and they join different career paths. But like, the world's gonna grow. And what's gonna happen? We're gonna need more buildings. There's plenty of work to go around. And if you operate out of that mindset, like, it's not, I want to engage with trade partners at the right time. Yeah. But I also don't know if I know that this trade partner has done this type of work in the past, do I really need 2 other trade partners to look at this thing? Right? They're a partner with us already in this market type. And then maybe these other trade partners specialize in this other one. Now, GCs are jack of all trades, master of none, right? They'll diversify their portfolio because they pick up work that way in these different markets. Just like you said, there's a market sector you guys don't do, right? And you're in Boston. But I think if you look at all of those different data points, there's a way to really improve target value design that doesn't just pit, contractors against each other, and get you the best value and get you the highest quality building at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk a lot about target value design. It seems like Trey for the last 3 weeks anyways. And the idea you're always working toward that number, the client needs to hit. But Justin, I mean, when you're the developer, it feels like a little bit like you built the target. Maybe it's not always something that's handed to you. I mean, I guess is that a little bit of a different kind of pressure in the estimating process? I mean, I guess, how does the pro forma and the estimate, do they actually interact in some way on a live deal? Are they running in parallel? I assume they're not the same document. Like, how are the two teams reconciling our estimate versus our pro forma that we're presenting?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll take one step back and just talk about like the differences that I've seen, personally. Um, I've been here, almost 5 years. In the last 3.5 years, we've brought 5 projects to market, in construction, 2 of which, we're aiming to actually complete this year. In my GC world, I would have done 5 in a year at least. And so, first and foremost, the target setting and the amount of detail that goes in, because I'm plugged in throughout the entire process. If I'm not actively, estimating a project, I'm, at least attending meetings and helping to drive design and all that stuff that, a typical GC will, bid the SDs or the DDs, drop off for a couple months, and then all of a sudden pop back up with the GMP set, and you're like, go, 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 go. We have more control over that and visibility to it. But it also means that we need to help drive that so there aren't that many surprises or, that many changes at the end of the project where the ability to make that change and the cost of it is going to be inverse of each other, right? And so that's a big part of it. From the pro forma and estimate side of things, they don't talk directly to each other. They run more in parallel. So I'm working on the estimate, and typically I'll complete, or at least have, initial draft of the estimate, and discuss a little bit with the development team, and they'll start plugging some numbers. But typically we'll still have that interface of sitting down in a meeting, reviewing the estimate. Maybe the developer will, one of the associates will bring in their laptop and start plugging some things into the pro forma to see if it works. And usually that's done more on the front end where we're trying to like test some assumptions. And then they'll come back and say, hey, we're seeing that this is an issue. Or a lot of times, when we're further down the line, it's, okay, cool, let's digest this. We're going to look at some things. They'll look at rents. They're going to pull in operations costs. They're going to look at, everything in the market, the rates and all that stuff, and be like, okay, we're still short. So where are we going to pull that from? Going to need to do some VE, or we're going to need to go to the seller and try to negotiate something there, or any number of different avenues we can go down, we'll go down. But we try to at least work collaboratively that way. And I think on the front end there's more real-time interface, where on the back end it's there's a lot of bits and pieces as we start to get towards that end goal of closing and moving forward with the project into construction. So,
Is there a point in
but it's a
time where
challenge.
the pro forma sort of starts to lock in as the governing document, and then pre-con is trying to do everything they can to protect the number, or is it kind of the other way around where you guys are really establishing if the project's really
Yeah.
feasible to move forward with?
Yeah, it's most often at the kickoff of SDs, which is generally where it should be. But obviously, it'll shift and change if big things come up. Like, one of the big drivers or the biggest unknowns and variables that we always have on a project is the dirt, is the land. And
Geotech reports.
Yeah, exactly. If we can't spend enough, and it's not necessarily our team's issue. Obviously, we gotta to manage the costs up front if we don't have an investor yet on board, or we want to try to mitigate risk on the upfront cost side of things. We're not necessarily doing exactly what the geoengineer and the environmental engineer had laid out in their proposal to do for investigations. Now that puts some risk on the back end, and some cases that hurts us, other cases not so much. And so that's the calculations that our teams and our side of things on construction pre-con need to do as well. Like, guys, we learned our lesson last time, so let's apply that this time. Or, no, we agree with you, let's take the risk because we think it's low, and we understand that you don't want that spend to be too high up front. Because again, particularly in our region, projects can go silent for a number of years, and holding on to that spend is challenging for the project overall. So, but yeah, it's trying to play around with all of those things to make the most sense, and to mitigate everyone's risk at the end of the day, so that we get the ultimate returns that we're looking for on every person's docket, right? So it's trying to work together on that stuff.
I imagine even those meetings with when someone pulls their laptop out and starts plugging numbers in, and you're like, well, this is what it is. And they're like, well, we need to do this, this, or this. And you're like, well, like, the market is saying this is what it is, right? Like, because now it's 2 years later and this is it. So do we want to like VE or just like cut floors off this thing? Just to like, yeah, like that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, the design intent you're cutting is yours.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's we had some challenging discussions on some past projects, things that we realized could have been done better up front, or
Yeah.
thought about more carefully. There are also some times where I hate to say it, this is going to be on record, but sometimes they're right. Sometimes the numbers we're getting are maybe a little bit too safe, and we find that out when we go to do buyout or whatever. And obviously, again, we're trying to mitigate risk, and we're using our best understanding. And if things all line up historically, and both on past projects and over time, for that particular project, and you trust the folks that are giving you that information, then there's less of a reason to take that risk. But sometimes we still need to do it. So it's about, again, it comes down a little bit to like the art, the relationships. So like, here's what I'm seeing or hearing in the market about these materials or this labor force. Yes, we can take a little bit of risk here, or we can take a lot of risk, but ultimately we all need to agree that we're doing that, to be able to move forward, because we're not going to just absorb all of that risk up front, because then at that point we're giving up contingencies and fees to get us moving forward still. So
does having more and this might lead us to the next section too, but does having more ability to programmatically adjust things in an estimate around, like I mentioned, chopping floors off, or even a unit mix, or rooms or things like that, does that speed things up in the process, or can that help speed things up in the process?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, up until, even start or middle of SDs, it's really handy to be able to do that. Once we start getting into SDs, we try to, for Mill Creek, and I think a lot of our competitors that are like us, we try to front end a lot of decisions around unit types and some of those finishes, like unit finishes, corridor finishes. Try to front end as much of that as we can, so that we can kind of set that cost and benchmark it over the entire rest of the pre-development process. Yeah, I would say, the ability to kind of pivot and conceptualize things more rapidly is helpful early, before that happens. So that, once the design team starts drawing, they're not having to go back and do a bunch of rework, because that's going to cost us time. It's going to cost them money and cost us money in the end.
So
So
essentially, yeah, I was just saying, sorry to interrupt. Like, essentially, you're saying, like, set some of the price, setting some of those costs early on. So at that point, price is, you got some rough design. I get that, but you're saying price is kind of impacting design, not just
Yep.
design driving cost. Because if you go back to design to cost, right, that's what creates this endless cycle of ST, like SDs, DDs, like so on and so forth, and even different percentages of those. Like, we've got 50% STs, right? So if there's a way to more rapidly option engineer those things, then it potentially, A, it can be done faster, but then B, it actually can create better shared understanding, because then the designer knows what's going on, the builder's doing the same thing, like they've got their cost in there, they feel good about it, and the developers, like, yeah, our IRR is going to be good on this, so it looks good right now, we're working towards target value. It's just potentially a better process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
being able
Yeah.
to pivot on things and use that parametric estimating approach is helpful. We've, in our typical, Excel format that we've used forever, it's been set up that way. We always have to rebuild estimates and utilizing the unit matrices or area matrices to inform some of those fixed cell values. We'll name a cell, say, GSF for gross square foot, and be able to use that in our calculations down the road. And so, that historically that's how we've done things. So we've kind of done that already. And I think that's partly because we're integrated and, needed that to happen anyway. But there's still improvements that we can do with that. And then it's, further down the line with, the value engineering or value management side of things that becomes that much harder to contextualize with the overall estimate. Like, typically we'll have a list of different options. We'll go through those multiple times. Some are targets, some are specific items. And, we'll review that with the design team, see what their appetite is for those things. And then make some decisions on those, whether we need to get more information or move forward with that change. And we'll capture that and try to share that with the design team. But sometimes the exact direction of that can be missed, or the exact reasoning behind why we made those decisions, later down the line, get lost. And that's something we always have been trying to improve upon, and have better tools for that is one of the big things, on top of, improving the already implemented parametric side of things as well.
Awesome.
It sounds like you guys have built a model that eliminates maybe some friction in this whole process, especially, for what you guys are doing there internally. We've been talking about that friction, for the past few weeks, and you got handoffs and translation failures, misaligned incentives, whatever the case may be. And I'm curious to get your take on, if you had to advise a developer who doesn't have your internal construction capabilities, right? Maybe they have to hire a GC. What would you tell them about how to engage that GC in pre-con to actually get more value from the relationship?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's getting to understand their team, and establishing, again, that relationship, that communication layer that is so important, with moving that relationship forward, and understanding the capabilities of the team. And then I would say, asking them how they work, how they prefer to work, see if that aligns with how you as the developer like to work or need to work, and have some conversations around, meeting expectations on both sides to help make that process go smoother. And then, go further and talk about, all the other stakeholders at the table, particularly the design side of things.
Hmm.
There were numerous times where we would present, back at Callahan, as a third party GC, present a list of VM items that, some were targets again, some were specifics, present it just to the owner and not the design team. And that communication layer and that efficiency of all that information flowing was almost null, right? And so having a more connected process, more connected workflows is helpful, and let the teams talk to each other. There's no reason why you wouldn't want that at the end of the day, because it's gonna provide some better collaboration and better brainstorming during meetings to say, hey, we as a GC have seen this happen multiple times, so let's either avoid it or let's rocket towards it. And then on the design side, they're going to say, well, this is why we can't do it now, but let's think about maybe a slightly different way. And they've certainly seen their fair share of similar projects as well. And maybe the developer is only done a third or less of that type of product type, and doesn't know everything, so they should be relying on their teams to tell them, hey, this is how it's going to be the most efficient and cost effective for you at the end of the day. So I think taking that approach of connecting the teams, being collaborative, having that relationship, and communicating openly is the most crucial part. And how you do that can differ from developer to developer and GC to GC. But understanding how each one does it upfront helps at least start breaking down those barriers that typically, are there to start. So.
Awesome.
What if you had to flip it? I mean, does it work the same if you have that was a developer working with a GC? If the GC is trying to earn a better relationship with a developer, uh, certainly the communication piece of it. But is there anything on that side that could go the other way?
Oh, for sure. You can ask the same of the team and say, hey, we want to be able to interface with the design team more. And we had some of those conversations. The challenge that I faced, in my seat as just an estimator for a GC, where there were a number of other estimators. I had a chief estimator or director of pre-construction that we had to go through, and then all the executives to get there, who are the executives are the one typically talking most consistently with the developer. Being able to drive that message home tended to be a challenge, at least early on. Got better over time, but there were still instances where we became more at arm's length than we should have been or wanted to be.
Yeah.
So trying to be forceful and having that mindset. If you're an estimator or bid coordinator and wanting to see some changes in your organization, you shouldn't be afraid to go talk to the executives or the leadership team to say, hey, I think we could be doing this better, and here's how I see we could be doing it. And it's about communication, it's collaboration. Hopefully, if you're a good enough company, you're doing that internally well, so you know how to kind of pivot and do that externally a little bit better. But I would say don't be afraid to move that forward and be that champion for your company if you're not in a position to do so directly.
Yeah.
Because
Excellent point.
ultimately you're just gonna sit there being frustrated by the whole thing and wishing it were done better for however many years. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I got to spend a few minutes on technology just because it's my world and because you're doing something that requires it at a level, most companies maybe don't. You're running this pre-con process across, a national multifamily portfolio. And tell us a little bit about your pre-con tech stack, if you will, or your whole tech stack. You talk about it all you want. Are you guys using an estimating platform? Are you using internal stuff, Excel? What tools do you guys use to get through the day-to-day there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So historically, before I came on board, Excel estimate all the way through for conceptual and detailed and GMP. Uh, bid coordination was primarily done in Smart Bid. When I came on board, Building Connected was being adopted, and I pushed for that here because I had actually brought it to my team back at Callahan and got them to change from Smart Bid to Building Connected. More recently, we've stayed in Excel on the estimate side of things, but more recently we've moved everyone over either to Building Connected or Procore, since Procore is our project management software of choice. And that, there's some benefits to having all that information and that data live together. But for me personally and for our team here, we found that to be a little too restrictive in how we wanted to work and get the feedback that we needed. So we've stayed in Building Connected for the time being on that side, though certainly would love to see some improvements on the ability, especially on the bid leveling side, to do some things there. But the ability to have that connected network is helpful. On the takeoff side, a lot of folks still are using on-screen takeoff or Bluebeam. I have adopted Autodesk Takeoff. I think I might be one of the only ones in the company doing it. But I've been trying to push to do, use more of the BIM modeling that we get from our design teams to help, escalate and improve the takeoff process, especially when I had, 3 projects going into GMP last year. I needed to speed things up a little bit. So that was certainly helpful. We've had some folks look at some of the AI solutions like Toggle and others. No one's totally sold on it yet. And I haven't actually tested it myself, but always looking at ways to improve that. And then, just typical Microsoft suite. We've recently, made the move to do everything through Microsoft 365, through SharePoint, and all of that, somewhat to the detriment of some of the things that we did, like Smartsheet. I was a big Smartsheet user for the pre-construction project management side of things to be able to coordinate and collaborate with teams. Support for that's starting to go away. So trying to look at alternative ways to do that, either within the SharePoint and Microsoft suite of things, or other more affordable solutions. And again, Procore, does come into play down the road. Once we start getting into DD and whatnot, we'll start getting documentation and RFIs and stuff running through there, so that it flows to the project team once they come on board, which we're usually bringing at least a project manager, sometimes a super in during the GMP stage to act as kind of that secondary layer of pre-con to help run the bid coordination and leveling process together, so that once they hit the ground running with buyout, they better understand the project and can kind of work from there. But we're always looking at new things. Obviously, one of the reasons we connected was we've been looking at Edify for quite a while now, and just recently made some more improvements towards that end. And I'm hoping over the next few weeks we have some good conversations with Nick and Dan and the rest of the team and Trey to move that along. We've looked at some things like AI design review platforms, a couple different ones, in fact, because that's a big part of our workflow is putting eyes, third-party eyes on our documents to make sure they're up to snuff, because we can only put so much time into that ourselves. And always open to other solutions out there as well. Obviously, a lot of them out there at the moment, and AI is a big player as well. So we're trying to figure out how all of that kind of works for us or doesn't. And so it's exciting for me because I'm a tech guy. I love getting into that stuff, but it's also a little daunting now because there's so much of it. And, some of the horror stories of the past, come back to, up when we're trying to figure out if we want to move forward with things. And so it's an interesting time to be in the market for all that type of stuff. And thankfully starting to see more, support and innovation from the executive and management side of things than
Right.
I've seen ever before, both here and in my previous job, which is exciting. And I hope that we continue to do so and don't falter on that, because I think we're going to need to at least keep up, if not be on the forefront in some cases, to stay one of the leaders in our market. So
You're talking about support on with using technology and tools.
yes,
Yeah,
yep,
that's great. That's great to hear. You guys have to be accumulating just a ton of historical data on your projects with all the markets that you're in. I mean, how do you actually capture that so you can use it um, on a new project? Is it in that SharePoint drive, or is it in Bob's head, or
yeah, yeah.
where does it live?
It's the data is in SharePoint, in Procore. Its usefulness is up here, in our heads for the most part. I think our operations side of things and some of our national support teams, particularly IT and stuff, have been a little quicker to adopt those things, somewhat out of necessity, but also just interest and support of that. Construction in particular, as you probably both know, has been slow to change, for good reason.
No.
There's, again, we get back to the trade partner side of things. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of those folks are, not super technical, and I don't want to discredit anyone who is, but for the most part, you're looking at folks who are, more comfortable now using things like Procore and Building Connected and BIM models and stuff. But sometimes they're still relying on third party consultants to help them with their models, or coordination and stuff. So there's still that
Yeah.
that piece that is going to be difficult to get over. But I think moving that forward is helpful. And I think we could be doing a better job, and that's one of the reasons why we've been looking at Edify to help us. And we've looked at other platforms as well to do it, but this is
Yeah.
the one that I think most aligns with how we currently work and where we want to go with being able to capture and use our data.
Mhm.
And that was a big push. I just did a presentation to the East Coast VPs of construction last week on Edify, and there was a lot of interest and support towards it because of the historical data piece and the ability to be smarter about our cost, to have that cost intelligence layer that we've kind of failed to have, beyond just relying on our pre-con folks and our construction folks to carry that information forward. And thankfully we've had a number of folks that have been here forever and predate Mill Creek, as it's been known as Mill Creek. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be around forever. And so we need to make sure that we're capturing that for the health and benefit of the company long term too.
That's right.
Did you listen to our podcast from 2 weeks ago? It feels like you did.
I did just come across your page today, but no, I certainly, again, being a tech guy, I've listened to a
You know
number
the
of
drill, yeah.
folks, and
Yep.
different podcasts out there as well. So I try to keep up with it because it's, as Trey alluded to early on in this, I've got
Yeah.
a passion towards improving things, and from where I sit, I've been with only 2 companies,
Yeah.
and primarily in multifamily, so I don't know everything. I don't claim to at all, but so I at least am a good learner, and also have a lot of interest in different things. So anytime I can get a chance to go out and find some different point of view or some different solution, I'm going to be at least open to what that is, because it's going to inform my thoughts and the direction I think I want to go towards, and hopefully others do as well. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
we certainly appreciate you sharing your experience and your perspective. And I tell my kids this too. The more life's a network and timing is serendipitous. Meet people as you grow and go throughout life, and you'll learn all kinds of things that kind of shape and inform and do all that stuff. Not to say everything's you can take some and not take some, whatever. But the more that we share, and the more that we know and that we share through our experiences, it's like everything going into a rock tumbler and coming out all polished rocks.
yeah,
So
Yeah,
I
that's
appreciate
I
that.
remember I went to Wentworth Institute of Technology in Boston for civil engineering ultimately, but I remember the day I was moving in freshman year, my dad was taking me, and one of his good friends called me on the way up there saying good luck and stuff. But the one thing that stuck with me, what he said was, you're going to get a great education, you're a smart kid and everything, but make an effort to get out there, get to know your professors, get to know staff, get involved with different things, whether it's sports or different programs on campus or outside of campus. Like that's where the value of you going there is going to be. And I've tried to, pull that forward into, my career and my life, like be interested, be open, and look for those relationships at the end of the day. Cause that's going to help open up opportunities that you didn't think were there. And potentially allow me to open up opportunities for others as well that they didn't think were there. So I think that was an important thing for me, at the age of 18 or whatever it was to hear, and definitely stuck with me for a long time.
Justin, I have a building science degree and I'm in sales, so yeah, get it.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, it sounds like it's time for Fast Five. Trey, do you want to read them? I think we put Justin in the hot seat this week, and you deliver the five. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'll read them. All right. Fast Five. Looks like we had a couple options this week. All right.
The rules are, Justin, it's 5 questions. It's rapid fire, just short, quick answers, and we won't be too hard on you. You'll get them all quick.
I'll keep it under a minute apiece.
Great. All right. So, biggest myth developers believe about construction costs.
That we're holding back information or costs that there could be more savings there.
True or false? A developer who acts as their own GC always gets a better outcome.
False. Not always.
You're coming back on the show, Justin. Hardest conversation you have in pre-con with your team, a trade partner, or an investor?
Think with trade partners, it's giving them the feedback, knowing that they worked hard on putting it together, and they were likely instrumental in informing either my knowledge of the scope or helping with VE, and having to let them down because they were too high still.
Dude, you're tugging on the heartstrings. I'm got happy tears over here. I love that. One thing every GC should know about how a developer actually reads their estimates.
Yeah, they don't necessarily care about the detail until it needs to inform them why something is the way it is. So high level and good metrics are good ways to start the conversation.
Love that. Gosh, Justin, so good. Like you prepped. All right, finish this sentence. The pre-con team that figures out blank will have a massive advantage in the next 5 years.
Better capturing and leveraging their data.
That is excellent.
Well done. Well done. Well done. Well, we've been building this show from the inside out and talking about the pre-con process, the people problem, the cost problem, the cost narrative, et cetera, the estimator shortage. Today we got a full picture trait from someone who doesn't have the luxury of separating a lot of those things. They're doing it all in-house. And when you're the developer, the GC, you own all of it. You got the estimate, the investor conversations, the trade partner relationships, the VE decisions where you're cutting your own design, all that good stuff. And I keep coming back to the problems that we've been, really talking about. There's the same things probably exist everywhere. You got those translation failures, cost narrative gaps, misaligned incentives, all that stuff. And a lot of them exist maybe in the handoff processes and the companies that figure out how to compress those handoffs from one. And it sounds like they've really got a lot of that nailed. Those handoffs and their own cost story from concept to close are the ones, they're going to be a win. So, what say you from the episode?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the metrics as Justin, as the like connecting point from a builder's thing, and details, not that they're not relevant. You have to back up the metrics, but communication and metrics. We say that people are your value. Process is how you deliver. Technology is the bridge that makes both better. You literally just showed us the bridge that goes from builder to GC, which is exactly what we're trying to show here. So this is huge. That's awesome. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Happy to do
Justin,
so.
we'll give you the last word. You're the guest. So any last words of knowledge you want to provide us today? It's been outstanding having you here.
Yeah, no, happy to have participated. And yeah, I think a lot of exciting things going on in the construction industry, a lot of challenging things going on. So keep your head above water, try to be proactive about changing things and looking at new ways or new opportunities to do it, and rely on those relationships to help you with that as well.
More. He's just
Love it.
bringing it all. I love it. All right, everyone. Well, hit subscribe wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. We're on all of them. Share it with someone at work. If you have a topic you want to discuss, leave a comment on the videos. If you'd like to come on the show, send us that as well. We'd love to have you. Don't forget, Proper Precon Podcast is powered by Edify, the estimating platform built for pre-construction teams doing serious work. Edify ensures that from first concept to final contract, teams are aligned, data is connected, and all the project stakeholder value is maximized. Check us out at edify.com. That's EDIPHI.com. Trey, we'll see you around. I'll see you next week at Advancing Pre-Construction. Justin, thank you again for coming on the show. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
All right. Yeah.